Yes, we are by Daf Lamed Bet Amud Bet. So just to refresh what we were talking about, so we brought a machloke between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. The simple understanding of the machloket was it sounded like Rabbi Yossi held Isur Chal al Isur, and Rabbi Shimon held Ein Isur Chal al Isur. Right? The machloket was if somebody is together, let's say his two brothers married two sisters, one of the brothers dies without children, but it's an erva to the other brother. So if the brother does yibum, how many isurim is he over? Rabbi Yossi said he's chayav 2, eshet ach and achot isha, and Rabbi Shimon said only one.
This is erva, but he could yibum.
No, he can't. He did an isur. The question is, how many isurim did he do? So Rabbi, again, the case is like this: Reuven and Shimon are two brothers married to two sisters.
Yeah.
Reuven dies.
Okay.
Now let's say Shimon is together. He sleeps with Reuven's wife. So how many isurim did he do? Rabbi Shimon said that whatever, it doesn't matter what he was thinking. It could be he thought that they're allowed to do yibum. But how many isurim is that? That's the question. So Rabbi Shimon says only one isur, because you don't have isur chal isur. She's either first was eshet ach, and then the second isur is nachal, or first she was achor isha, and the second isur is nachal. So right, she's not an eshet ish because her husband died.
I know, but she's her sister-in-law too.
Right.
And
so,
both ways sister-in-law.
Right. So Rabbi Shimon says whichever one came first, that's what he's chayav. Rabbi Yossi says no, chayav both. So we had a question. The Gemara asked that we had a different place that Rabbi Yossi tells us ein isur chal isur. So we tried to work it out. We said maybe there's difference between other cases, which was an isur mosif that Rabbi Yossi agrees to which the Gemara backed down. And Rava, this is the last thing we said was it Rava? Amar Rava. Let's continue from there. Amar Rava. Amar Rava, Ma'ale ani alav ki'ilu asa shtayim. So Ela Rava says, when Rabbi Yossi says he's chayav for 2, it doesn't mean because isur chalal isur, and he was over 2 isurim. What it means is we treat it as if he did 2 isurim, meaning like midinei shamayim, he's chayav as if he did 2 isurim, but we don't actually say that he's isur is chalal isur and he actually did 2 isurim. Ve'eno chayav ela achat. He's only chayav for 1, meaning if he has to bring he did it by mistake and he has to bring a korban chatat, so he only brings 1 korban chatat, not 2. But he doesn't. He's not. Midinei shamayim, it's considered 2. V'chen ki ata ravin amar Rabbi Yochanan ma'ale ani alav ki'ilu asa shtayim. It's just when Rabbi Yossi says he's chayav 2, it doesn't mean he actually has to bring 2 korban chatat. He brings 1 korban chatat. There's only 1 isur that's counted because ein isur chalal isur. But what it means is in terms of the severity of the avon, it's as if he did 2. Ve'eno chayav ela achat, but he's only chayav 1 korban, meaning the chiyuv is over only 1 chiyuv, but we treat it like there's 2 isurim in midinei shamayim. So my nafkamina, who cares if you treat it like there's 2 in dinei shamayim? What difference does it make to you how Hashem considers it? So lekovro ben rishayim gimurim. The difference is where we bury him. These opinions hold that we bury him between Rishayim Gimurim, meaning he's considered more of a Rasha because it was a very bad act, even though these things are both not Chayav Mitat Betin, sister-in-law from the husband's wife and the wife's sister, they're both not Chiyuv Mitat Betin, they're just Chayav Karet, but if together that's a bigger deal, and we bury him the way Rashi learns. It seems like we bury him where we bury other chiyuvei mitot beitin. Okay, uplukta deitmar. So the Gemara says the following: it's this whole thing, or whether Rabbi Yossi holds of isur mosif or not, is related to the following machloket. So the Gemara is going to bring a few cases. I believe 3 cases where we have very, very similar machloket. Zar sheshimesh b'Shabbat. So case number 1 is you have somebody who's not a kohen, and he goes to the Beit HaMikdash, he does the avodah on Shabbat. So he's doing melacha on Shabbat, that's one isur. And he's also doing avodah, which even if he was doing it during the week, he's not a kohen, he's not allowed to do it, that's the second isur. So isur number 1 is he's a zar, he's not allowed to do the avodah at all. And isur number 2 is he's doing on Shabbat. So Rabbi Chia Omer chayav shtayim. Rabbi Chia says he gets 2 isurim, one for zar, one for Shabbat. Bar kapara Omer eno chayav ela achat. Bar kapara says no, he only gets 1 isur. So kafatz Rabbi Chia v'nishba. Rabbi Chia got up and he said, I swear, ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe. He says, this is what I heard from Rebbe. Shtayim. He gets 2 chiyuvim. Kafatz bar kapara v'nishba. Ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe achat. Bar Kapara got up and he said, I make a shavua, I swear to you, I heard from Rebbe that he's only chayav 1. So hitchil Rebbe Chia ladun. Rebbe Chia started to say his argument. And he said, you know why he's chayav 2? Because Shabbat lakol nesra. Shabbat is asur for everyone. Shabbat is asur across the board. Keshehutra b'mikdash, etzel kohanim hutra. When Shabbat became mutar, for the avodah, that was only for kohanim. So the kohanim hutra v'lo zarim. The heter was only for kohanim. There was never any heter for anyone else who's not a kohen to do the avodah. So yesh kan mishum zarut veyesh kan mishum Shabbat. So when the guy does the avodah, he never had a heter for it. Only kohanim had a heter. But this guy who's not a kohen, he never had a heter. So he ends up violating 2 isurim. 1 Shabbat, and 1 doing the avodah as a non-kohen. So itchil Bar Kapara ladun. Bar Kapara gets up and he starts to say his argument, and he says Shabbat lakol nesra. Shabbat is asur for everybody. Now there's a heter of avodah. So keshehutra b'mikdash. Keshehutra b'mikdash. Keshehutra b'mikdash hutra. When it was mutar, it became mutar it became mutar in the mikdash. So even for anybody who comes to do avodah, meaning he's understanding the heter of doing avodah on Shabbat was not just a heter for a kohen. It's just in the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat, there's no isurim of having to do with the avodah. So even someone who's not a kohen, if he does it, he's not violating Shabbat and kan ela zarut. There's only 1 isur of being a non-kohen. So that was the machloket. Does the heter of avodah of Shabbat apply to the kohen only, or it applies to everybody? And the nafkamina would be, is this guy chayav 1 or 2? That's one machloket. Zar, someone who's a non-kohen that did the avodah on Shabbat. Number 2, Baal mum sheshimesh betum'ah. You have a Baal mum that he's a kohen, he has a mum, so he's not supposed to be doing the avodah, and he's also tameh. So certain cases, even though a person is not supposed to do the avodah when they're tameh, but certain cases, there's a concept tuma hutra betzibur. For a korban tzibur, even if he's tameh, he's allowed to bring the korban tzibur. So the question is, this guy, he's a baal mum, and he's tameh, and he brought the korban tzibur. So Rabbi Chia Omer chayav shtayim. Rabbi Chia says he's chayav 2. Number 1, he's tameh. Number 2, he's baal mum. Bar Kapara Omer en chayav ela achat. Bar Kapara says no, he's only chayav 1. Kafatz Rabbi Chia v'nishba ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe shtayim. Rabbi Chia says, I swear, I heard from Rebbe 2. Kafatz Bar Kapara v'nishba ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe achat. Bar Kapara gets up and he says, I make a shavua, I swear that this is what I heard from Rebbe, only 1. So hitchilu Rabbi Chia ladun. Sorry, Rabbi Chia, he started to say his argument. He said, Tum'ah lakol nesra. Tum'ah was asur for on everybody. Meaning Tum'ah is asur for any tameh to do the avodah. Keshehutra b'mikdash etzel kohanim timimim hutra. When there's a heter of tuma to bring a korban tzibur, even when he's tameh, that's by kohanim that are timimim, that are able to do the avodah. There's no heter of tum'ah for a kohen who's a baal mum. So, l'kohanim timimim hutra v'lo leba'alei mumin. The heter of doing the avodah when he's tameh for the korban tzibur is only a heter for a korban who's not a baal mum. There was never a heter for a kohen who's not a baal mum. There was never a heter for a kohen baal mum. Therefore, he's left with both isurim, because the isur of tuma was never removed. There was never a heter on that for him, and he's a baal mum also. So yesh kan mishum baalei mumin veyesh kan mishum tuma. He has both isurim on him. So itchil bar kapara ladun. Bar kapara gets up and he starts to say his cheshbon. He says his understanding over here and his argument. The tuma lakol neesra. Tuma, everybody was asur to do avodah as tameh. Keshehutra b'mikdash hutra. When it became mutar for everybody in the mikdash, even a baal mum, meaning the tuma is lifted, even though he can't do the avodah, but that isur of tuma is lifted. Mm-hmm. So therefore, ein kan ela mishum baal mum. So the only isur left on this guy is baal mum. So that's another machloket, Rabbi Chia and Bar Kapara. So the first case we had was a zar, a non-kohen, who did the avodah. The second case we have is a baal mum, who's tameh, who did that. The first case was he did on Shabbat, zar who did on Shabbat. Second case is a baal mum that he did while he was tameh. He brought a korban tzibur while he was tameh. Last case, zar she'achal milika. You have a zar that ate milika. Now milika was when the kohen would do the shechita of the bird. It wasn't a regular shechita from the front. He did it from the back with it right. So the problem is that that's not a kosher shechita in general. So if a zar eats it,
the Gemara there or the Torah doesn't mention why the kohen has to do it that way.
Okay, that's a separate thing.
I know.
The pasuk says umalak et rosho, right? He has to do milika. So the Mefarshim explain exactly why here. They try to give different reasons, but the case we're dealing with here is a zar, somebody who's a non-kohen. So he's not supposed to be eating any of the kochim, and he's also eating milika. He's eating this, which it wasn't even shechted properly. Meaning, it's not if it was.
That's melika. Kohen could eat it, yeah.
Kohen eats it, yeah. So there's a heter for kohanim to eat it. But the question is, if a non-kohen eats it, meaning, for example, like this: if there's a regular shechita, kohen does shechita of a cow. So if somebody who's a non-kohen eats it, so he's not allowed to eat it. He's not allowed to eat something that's kochim. But it's not a nevela. What he's eating is kosher. Yeah. It's kosher. It's just now over here, it's not even kosher because it didn't get a shechita. If you take a bird and you do milika, it's not kosher. So over here, you're dealing with two isurim. He's a non-kohen eating kochim, and also for him is not kosher. So it's a nevela. So Rabbi Chia omer chayav shtayim. Rabbi Chia says it's two isurim. Bar kapara omer en chayav le'achad. Bar kapara says no, only one. Kafatz Rabbi Chia v'nishba. Rabbi Chia got up and he made a swear. He said ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe shtayim. He said, I promise you it's two. I heard from Rebbe. I swear I heard from Rebbe. Two. Kafatz bar kapara v'nishba ha'avodah kach shamati mi Rebbe achat. Bar kapara got up and he made a swear and he said, this is what I heard from Rebbe. Achat, one.
Nobody believed him. You have to swear.
So the Gemara later on is going to explain how could this be that they're both swearing. And then when you make a shavua, that means that this is true. So how could they be? They're both swearing on opposite things. So the Gemara is going to explain that later. So itchil Rabbi Chia ladun. Rabbi Chia, he started to say his cheshbon over here. So he said that nevela lakol nesra. Nevela, something not kosher, is asur on everybody. An animal that didn't have shechita is asur for everybody. Keshehutra b'mikdash etzel kohanim hutra. When there's a heter of that nevela, that the milika, that's really a nevela, there's a heter, that's only heter for kohanim. So la kohanim hutra v'lo zarim. There's a heter only for kohanim, not for zarim. So yesh kan mishum zarut, yesh kan mishum milika. So you're left with two isurim. One is the guy's a zar, he's a non-kohen eating from the kochim. And also, it had milika. He's eating something that's a nevela. It's not kosher. So Itchil Bar Kapara Ladun. So Bar Kapara says his opinion now. He says, no. Nevela la kol nesra. Nevela was asur on everybody. Keshehutra b'mikdash hutra. When it became heter, there was a heter of that item in the mikdash, not necessarily only for kohanim. So there's a heter on that nevela for not only for kohanim. So you're left ein kan ela mishum zarut. So you're left with only one issue of zarut. So we're gonna actually stop here, even though it's early, because I don't want to go ahead. I want to stick to the schedule so that we start the perek. But and next week we're gonna finish the perek Be'ezrat Hashem,
So we should go
and then the
now?
following Monday. No, I'll read to you. I'll share with you something I saw from the Noda B'Yehuda on this topic. Very interesting case. He says like this. He's talking about he had a case. He was asked about this man that was with Eshet Ish for a few years. He was together with Eshet Ish, and now he comes to she was an Eshet Ish. Now he actually ended up marrying this lady's daughter, and he's So now he's coming to do teshuvah. He has a couple questions. He says, "Do I need to tell her husband that I was with her and she's asura on the husband? Do I not need to tell? And also, what's the deal with teshuvah?" So the Noda B'Yehuda has, how do I do teshuvah for this? And he's a weak guy, and he's trying to do teshuvah. He's learning all day. So Noda B'Yehuda goes through everything, and he touches a little bit on some of the Gemara that we did today and yesterday. So he first of all, when it comes to the part of teshuvah, he says a few very, very important lines. He says, when it comes to teshuvah, it's not all about the fasting. It's not all about the ikar is the teshuvah. You could do this sigufim and this fasting, but he outlines some type of teshuvah, some regimen of fasting. He also says if he fasts the whole life of mitushelach, it's not going to help him. It's all about the teshuvah. It's not the either way. He says like this. He says, let's take into consideration, because the guy was with this lady for, it was like 2-3 years. So there's Isur Eshet Ish. There's also an Isur Nida, meaning she may have been in Nida also. So do you have to do extra tshuva for Nida also, or only tshuva for Eshet Ish?
That's the doubt.
That's the question. So, okay, it sounds like it was understood that he was with her during times of Nida, potentially also. The question is, does he, is there 2 Isurim here that he did? So he says, Hine ze pashut she'isur Nida chal al Isur Eshet Ish. Isur Nida is going to be chal on top of Isur Eshet Ish. Why? Mishum have Isur Mosif. Because it's an Isur Mosif, meaning she was an Eshet Ish, so she was asura on everybody. When she becomes a Nida is chal on her because she becomes asura to her husband. So since Nida is chal on her for her husband, it's chal on her on top of the Eshet Ish for everybody else also. So if she was first Eshet Ish and then she became a Nida, so then it should be 2 Isurim. So migode itosaf Isur Nida legebe ba'ala. Okay. Says Omnam, he says, listen to this cheshbon. He says Omnam kol ze im bia rishona sheshachav etzla hanoef haya benidata. He says that's if she was an Eshet Ish and then she was a Nida and the guy slept with her. Then chalalav gam Isur Nida. But he says af she'eshet ish. Aval. Listen to this. It says im bia rishona sheshachav etzla hanoef hayta tehora minidata.
Bia rishona.
If the bia, meaning the first time that the guy slept with the Eshet Ish. If the first time that the guy was with the Eshet Ish, she was tehora, so at that moment, he says, as tekef ne'esra leba'ala mishum tuma, so that at that moment she becomes asura on her husband. Once she's already asura on her husband, he says, va'az af im na'asit achar kach nida lo chal isur nida klal. He says, in that scenario, since she's already asura on her husband, and she's an Eshet Ish, Nida is not chal on her, because who's it making her asur to? To her husband? She's already asura on her husband. To everybody else, she's already asura on everybody else. So he says, if Nida is not chal on her, so if that's the case, the guy shouldn't have to do teshuvah for the Nida. That's what he. De'en kan isur mosif leshum adam. There's no isur mosif. And there are a lot of questions on this. Nida adds other facets of isur. There's an isur of certain other isurim that are added on by Nida, but there's some questions on this.
In this case, even
So
if the guy sleep with somebody as a zona, and the zona is a nida.
that's an isur Nida. Over here, we're talking about she's an eshadish.
Uh-huh.
Talking about an eshadish, but the isur, he's saying the isur of Nida won't be chal if she's anyways asura to her husband, because if he slept with her before she was nida, so he slept with her, he did one isur eshadish, and now she became asura on her husband, and then she became nida, and he slept with her again. We don't consider it that he did an extra isur of nida because nida is not chal. However, he says umnam kol zeh litlamed b'makom acher kagon im haboel haya shogeg, etc. He says it only makes a difference by if she's shogeg, but he says aval li'inyan teshuvat hashavim, when it comes to teshuva, we'll read 1-2 more lines, then we'll go. He says when it comes to teshuva, vadai shechayav lashuv al kol ha'isurim af b'mkom she'en isur chal isur. When it comes to teshuva, even though technically ein isur chal isur, and it shouldn't be that the Isur Nida is Chal, it should be that the Isur Nida is not Chal, still he has to do Teshuvah for the Isur Nida. Mikol Makom al Riboy HaIsurim Michshev Rasha Tefeh. He's still considered more of a Rasha because of the Riboy Isurim. Where is he coming from? He says, Davar ze machloket Tanaim. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Masechet Yevamot, Daf Lamed Bet, Amud Bet. This is our Gemara, Machloket Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, whether we say Isur Chal Isur or not. The Kamar Elamar Rava Ma'ale Ani Alav Ki'ilu Asashtaim. Rava said, according to Rabbi Yossi, he doesn't have to bring 2 korban chatats when he's with his Eshet Ach, that's also Achot Isha, right? He doesn't have to bring 2. He's with his wife's sister, that's also his brother's wife after his brother died.
That's korban chatat is
Rabbi Yossi said there's no 2 korban chatats. You only have to bring 1 korban chatat. But when it comes to we treat it as if that's the way Rava learned. Ma'ale ani alav kilo asashtaim. We treat it as if he did 2. Ve'enu chayav ela achat. He only chayav 1 korban chata, but we treat it as if he did 2. V'chein ki ata ravin, Rabbi Yochanan, etc. The same thing. So l'may nafkamin l'kover bein Rishayim Gemarim. We said the difference is that we treat it like he did 2, and we bury him with the Rishayim. So he says harei af deino chayav ela achat mishum ein isur chal isur, even though there's only 1 chiyuv chatat because ein isur al chal isur mikol makom nitosaf rishol hitgadel al yidei zeh lekover ben Rishayim Gemarim. We bury him by the Rishayim Gemarim. Ken vadai b'tshuva tzarich lashuv al shtehen. When it comes to teshuva, it counts as if he did both, and he has to do teshuva for both. And he goes on to say the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi in this case, and therefore he has to do teshuva for both, even though technically the isur nida may not be chal because anyway she's asur on her husband.
So what's the story now?
Good